Hi friends, welcome back to the stream for another unscheduled session. I know it's a Sunday, it's not my usual Monday 10 a.m. US Eastern or Thursday 1 p.m. US Eastern. But on Friday I got nerd sniped, as you might recall, and did a little shell scripting, and this time that I got nerd sniped, it's actually kind of important. One of my projects that I often stream about is called notqmail. It's an open source email server. And I also have uh, some code that is very related to notqmail, but is so far still my own solo work and has not yet been integrated upstream into the community project. I want it to be, or something inspired by it, but in the meantime, it's mine. So I have the notqmail badge on this session, but to be very clear, notqmail doesn't have this problem because notqmail doesn't have this feature. So let me talk about what happened. What happened is that there is a mail server that is very popular for Unix systems. I think it's the default on Debian, which I assume means it's the default on Ubuntu. And, usually those aren't, I assume, listening on port 25. And if they are, I assume they're not listening on port 25 on an internet reachable address. But I guess, if enough people run that and decide that they do need a public mail server, then the easiest thing might be to promote what's already on their machines to public facing network listening service. Anyway, this is to me, surprisingly popular email server called exim. The reason it's surprisingly popular to me is that over and over and over again throughout its history, uh, despite what I'm sure are very good intentions by everybody involved, in developing it, it has had a lot of security vulnerabilities. And if you look at how it's architected, it's not that surprising. I haven't looked deeply into it, but I know from reading it's a single process kind of omnibus mail server in the way that SendMail was. And we know that SendMail was so difficult to live with, one of the reasons being security, that it motivated Qmail, it motivated Postfix, it motivated a lot of other things. Some of them didn't learn the lessons that SendMail was trying to teach. And from the outside, it looks like exim is one of those. And so a new remote vulnerability was announced in exim a couple, 3, 4 days ago. 2, 3, I don't know. That doesn't affect me in any way that I'm aware of, except that what does affect me is that I do have responsibility for some code that is related. And I want to find out if I have a problem, just in case, for some reason. Um, I don't have a reason to think I do, but I also would like to look into it and make sure I have a reason to think I don't. Otherwise, I don't. I'm I'm already pretty lucky with the security properties of my code, just by the way I chose to architect it, trying to learn the lessons from SendMail. But I'm not infallible, especially not with C, especially not with parsing and network code. And so this is a free chance for me to check my work. And it's actually better than free. Somebody helped to analyze it in a context very similar to mine, and I want to accept their help. That someone is Dr. Erwin Hoffmann, who, if you're interested in notqmail, you may know for his many and long-standing contributions to DJB derived or inspired software. So he, most of all, maintains a very long-standing individual fork of Qmail called sqmail that is as featureful as any Qmail derivative that we have. So there's a lot of good functionality in it. There's a lot that it can do today. And notqmail owes a debt to it, as does my own code, that because he has implemented so many things that people might want, there's code there that can be borrowed, and I have borrowed it for sure. So SQmail is probably the biggest thing, but he's also maintaining an IP version 6 enabled version of UXPy TCP, the original TCP server and TCP client, which you can plug and play in place of the original and enable dual stack or just IP version 6 listening for your services if you want to. It's that easy. And then he also maintains what I think was originally William Baxter's superscript.com SSL version of the same idea. So SSL server, SSL client. And he maintains what was a very interesting patch for many years to that tool from Scott Gifford and Charlie Brady, if I remember right, called UXPy TLS, which is a way for SSL to be dynamically enabled during a connection. So a network connection with SSL server with this patch, a client can start unencrypted, as often happens in certain network protocols, and then upgrade to encryption with, in the mail server world, that's start TLS. In POP3, it's STLS. I'm sure there's something in IMAP that if I knew the IMAP protocol, I would know what that was. But you start plain text and then you sort of selectively upgrade. And he had integrated that into his fork. For some reason, the client side of that patch got lost. The authors of the UXPy TLS patch had a client implementation also, and it would be desirable to have. Somehow that's not in UXPy SSL as maintained by Dr. Hoffman, but it could be. In the meantime, he's got these tools that anybody can use, and I have been using them for a while. So here he is saying, don't be too pleased with yourself if you're not running exim, as QMail people are not. And we want to be pleased with ourselves because typically these are the kind of problems we don't have. But let's be real. The release of notqmail 1.08 was specifically hastened to time and align on the schedule with an old bug or bugs reported against QMail from a long time ago, QMail being the parent project that led to notqmail, that its original author, DJB, dismissed as not exploitable in real situations because of how any sensible administrator, in his opinion, would have configured the services. So he dismissed the security impact of those and did not accept that it was a security bug in practice. But more recently, Qualys, the security research, etc. company, found a way that it can be exploited in a situation slightly different from the original. And so we, being the QMail community fork of record, they collaborated with us and sort of embargoed their own report until we could produce a release with the bug fixed in synchrony with their report, which was wonderful. And so the point is, the last notqmail release had features in it, had other bug fixes in it, but the reason we did it on the day we did it is to fix a security hole. So we haven't had zero of these remote potential executable situations. We've just had almost zero, and that's why I don't want to be smug. I want to keep it this way. We have advantages from our architecture. We have advantages from our libraries that we use, but we can always make mistakes. It'd be good not to. So here's Dr. Huffman saying he looked at his code, and he also looked at the really popular SMTP AUTH patch that's out there. And he said that it doesn't exactly apply because we have a different system, but he did find a seg fault, at least in a couple cases. If you have authentication in your QMail SMTPD, according to him, either because you're running SQmail, which has it included, or because you're applying the common SMTP authentication patch. And that makes me want to look into my code. So let me just show you what he's referring to. Let's get these side by side. He is saying somewhere in here we're going to see get auth type right there. This is the SQmail code. So hopefully this is the example he's talking about. For auth commands text, if case equals break, Strala copy s. Yes. Yeah, so this is the case that he's saying to watch out for right here. Corresponds to this code, looks like exactly. And he's saying also you need to check this or else you might get a seg fault. So he has inserted a check here before doing the Strala copy s, which is now conditional on the non-nullness, I guess, of this text. So, do I have this code in my code? I don't know, but I have a program that theoretically might, and it's time to look. The program that I have, again, this is not part of notqmail. It's the success of this project inspired me to start notqmail, but this is not in notqmail, and may or may not ever be in this form in notqmail. It depends on the other people who are working on the project with me. But the program that I'm responsible for, that I want to make sure doesn't have this problem, or fix if it does, is AuthUp, which you can see here. And AuthUp, on the right side, you have the POP3 service case. Before is the sort of dotted lines, and after with my code is the thick lines with a nice green box at the bottom. And then the left-hand side is the SMTP authentication case. Before, I think the example that Dr. Hoffman is talking about, most people not running SQmail who do have auth enabled will have patched it into their port 25 SMTP service a long time ago, before submission on port 587 was standardized. And so that will be shaped in this long, strange way. After you switch to my exceptutils, port 25 does not offer authentication because that's not its job, but it does offer opportunistic encryption, and that is available. And then for authentication, it happens on port 587, and you can see just the overall shape really resembles the shape of POP3 authentication, which is probably how it ought to have worked in the first place. So the way I did that is that I took qmail pop-up, I took the SMTP auth patch that Dr. Hoffman is referring to, and I refactored it until I had a single program, AuthUp, that either speaks a little bit of POP3, the user and pass verbs, to be able to parse those strings and pass them on to check password, or in SMTP, to speak the auth verb with, I think, only plain and login is all I implemented. I didn't do cram MD5. I didn't do NTLM, as is his example. So I'm not sure what to expect here because I don't remember, this is a long time ago, how I wound up refactoring that code. But let's pop over and look at it. So this is the head of my exceptutils tree in the authup.c file. And so I guess maybe go to the bottom and see the control flow before we get any further. So here's our main. We take a protocol, which is either SMTP or POP3. And we do the protocol. See what happens there. So somewhere here, here we go. So here's a table. The POP3 code is going to look substantially similar to qmail pop-up. And that's this pile, but we're not interested in that. The SMTP code is going to offer start TLS, auth, a couple other things. And so I guess the question is, how does my auth method work? This is the one where if there's a bug, I have it. So what is going on here? I do still have something called command. I'm also dealing with TLS in addition to authentication using UX by TLS. So that's just some logic here. This looks real similar to this. Yeah, I think I'm in the right pile of code here. Yup. This, except for the comment, is verbatim what I have. That's not the part with the problem. So I take this to be that I'm located correctly. I'm looking at where we're parsing. If the client sends auth, this is where we parse. What happens after it does not match. So what's happening in his code or the common authentication patch is that we are looping over whatever's in here. And he's saying you have to make sure it's not null before you go and copy from it or into it. Probably from it. I don't have anything that looks like that. Which my brain wants to interpret generously as cool, I don't have this problem, but let me just take a moment and see if I can be more sure. Do I have anything called auth commands? No. I closed the window, but let me bring it back. What is auth command? So he has a struct auth command, text and a function, and it looks a lot like my little table. With a string and a function, a string and a function, a string and a function. It looks a lot like what I have, except it looks like sort of subcommands. So auth what, auth login, auth plain, auth cram MD5. So I don't have that exactly. I do have the function names that are in his table. So maybe that code is still suspect. Yeah, so if it's login, then we're going to do the auth login of the string, and if it's plain, we're going to do auth plain of the string. So do I have any problems there? Base 64, SMTP AUTH, get line. None of this looks related to how I'm doing any of what I'm doing. Okay. Tentatively, feel pretty okay here. What would make me feel more okay is, as he says, he was able to maybe trigger a seg fault. So that seems like it's easy enough to try on a living service. I have a living service. So this is my own submission service on my own mail server using the code we were just looking at to offer start TLS and auth login plain. I don't think I'm allowed to say auth without saying start TLS. I might have to modify my production service to allow that for a moment. Yeah, so let's just say auth NTLM must start TLS first. So let's fix that. Um, what IP am I coming from? Coming from here. That's what I wanted. So if I go into exim control TCP rules, AUTH MIP, and then I can say, just for a moment, from this address, do not require TLS. Service qmail auth mipd cdb. Okay, then I should be able now to say, hello there, auth and TLM. It's just not implemented. Yeah, I don't think I have this problem. I think I refactored this code enough that I don't have this problem. I'm not totally sure, but you know, this was what I wanted to check. I definitely don't obviously have the exact same problem. I think that's good enough for me for today. So I'm going to decide that there wasn't a reason that I thought that I should have this problem, and then Dr. Hoffman offered a free, but check for this, and I did. And again, I go back to my architecture. I think that because of my choice of architecture, I'm unlikely to have a big problem. What is mildly concerning is that the SMTP authentication code that I borrowed from that patch was designed to run in the context of the unprivileged qmail D daemon user. That's usually how qmail SMTPD runs. I put it in a process that is now running as root. And so there is parsing from network input while running as root. That is kind of inherently concerning. That's why I have the program as small as I do, that it doesn't actually do anything itself. It parses as well or as badly as it can the username and password out of the auth login or auth plane, and then executes a different program, a program which has been used for a very long time and was written by somebody who's better at programming than I am. So there's a risk from what I have, but I feel like it's constrained by the shape of the architecture. And looking at the code, I think it's constrained by my code not doing the problematic thing. And at a quick check, it seems okay. So I'm going to say quit. I'm going to bounce back over here and remove that again. And make sure that I don't have any unexpected changes. That's from my last install. Okay, good enough for me. Yeah, I think the conclusion is I'm glad I don't run exim. Very glad. I wish I understood what it would take for more people not to do it. If you run notqmail, the problems you have will be different problems. For example, the fact that if you got authentication into your system, it's because you patched it there, or because you're running my add-on programs in conjunction with notqmail. But either way, like how to have this functionality is your problem in notqmail as of today. And I don't think there's anything that I need to do for accept utils. I don't think we have the problem. I'd be really surprised if we did, and the quick thing that I could check looks like no. And I'm going to call it for today, our little emergency session of do I have a security bug in my code? is probably not, and even more now, probably not. So I'm going to stop there. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back tomorrow with our regularly scheduled streaming.